Hey, good afternoon and welcome to the Small Business Briefing. It is Thursday, December 16th. This briefing, as always, is brought to you by Marana Group, a data, documents, and distribution solutions company. And we appreciate Marana Group and their underwriting and sponsorship of this briefing. I'm Rob Fowler with SBAM. Brian Calley is the co-host of this. Brian is beginning early next year, is going to be the new president and CEO of the Small Business Association of Michigan. So we kind of complete our transition. But today, actually, Brian is the SBAM holiday party. And so I thought I'd, whip out this gem for the holiday party. It's Italian, because you can tell it's got fragile on it. It actually is part of our theme, around SBAM. When somebody is caught doing something good, we give an award. It's the major award. This is not my award. I never won it, but I borrowed it from the person who did. So we're in the holiday season.
We set the standard for style around here. I don't know how I show my face, up next to you today. So that's sharp. It looks fabulous, Rob.
Well, it is. I missed Ugly Sweater Day, so I thought I'd bring it back. All right, so we have a lot to talk about. It seems like we say that a lot, but we do. There's plenty of things going on. We have. I'm going to call her a special guest, but I think she's about to become a brand new regular on the Small Business Briefing. A brand new, a relatively new employee at SBAM. Why don't you introduce her?
Yeah, great. Thanks, Rob. So we were really fortunate at SBAM to get our first choice, really the only choice, on Director of Government Operations. And her name is Alexa Kramer. And she's been here with us at SBAM for several weeks now and is already making a huge impact. And so we want to talk a little bit about the work that was done as the session closed here in this last week, and a couple of really big wins for small business that we worked on, and Alexa in particular. So Alexa, welcome to the team. Her title is Director of Government Operations. I think it used to be called Government Affairs, but we don't like government affairs. We like government operations. So Alexa, thank you for joining us today and all the work that you've done. Maybe give us a rundown. What happened in the last week of session here that small business owners need to know about?
Sure. Thanks, Brian, and thanks for having me on today. So if you've been paying attention to the media, you'll see that there's been a big economic development incentive package that has really eaten up a lot of the media's attention. But what is not maybe as well known is the fact that small business actually had a lot of wins to come through as well in that package. And so three big ones that I wanted to cover and let you guys know about. The first one being the PPT exemption expansion. So for personal property tax, we were sitting at, for our exemption, at $80,000. Through legislation, we were able to bump that up to $180,000, which is really great for our small businesses. Second is kind of this big pile of money, $409 million for afflicted businesses. And these are going to be coming in the form of grants that businesses can take advantage of to show that they had been afflicted during the COVID-19 pandemic. And that is capped at, I think, $5 million per business, but a great resource and some grants coming in for businesses to take advantage of. And then
let me stop you there for a moment, just as a reminder, we had on, you might, long-term viewers will remember that we had Jenny Sherrill, one of our board members, come on and talk about some testimony that she had, that she gave in the Appropriations Committee a while back it was on this afflicted business program. It went through the process. It got approved and sent to the governor. Unfortunately, it got vetoed at that point. Jenny was on to talk a little bit about that, her testimony and why we supported the package. But this idea of there are some businesses that were closed, required to be closed, but they still had to pay unemployment insurance premiums, still had to pay licensing fees to state and local governments. They still had to pay property taxes. So the idea is that some portion of that would be granted back to those businesses that were closed the longest, and it's really the principle of it, right? That you have to pay these things to government, and they told you couldn't operate, and we were strongly supportive of that. Even though it got vetoed, we never gave up the faith, and we're looking for opportunities, and thankfully found an opportunity to kind of attach to something that was kind of moving through like a freight train and saying, wait, but if you're going to go after new business, make sure that you help the ones that are already here. And okay, so what's the third one, Alexa?
No, that was a good point. Yeah, the idea of being able to kind of capture all of the work that we've done during the pandemic, and being able to kind of put it into one big bucket at the end of the day through a grant is really great to be able to see that come to fruition after all this time. But the last one being the SALT parity bill is what it's being called. This would allow pass-through businesses to be able to deduct their state and local tax, so SALT, state and local tax, at the entity level, which helps out and minimizes their cost for that federal cap that's about at $10,000. So really big things that came through, didn't get again a lot the big attention that the larger economic incentive package got, but I think that this was a really great wins for small businesses. And I would say also at SBAM, you guys know that we are intentionally bipartisan. I wanted to make note that these deals that we're able to get across the finish line were bipartisan. And I think that that's a really important note as well. Something as big as this and as impactful as what we were able to accomplish certainly couldn't have been done without bipartisanship. And so that was really great to be able to see. And I think that it really tees us up well going into the new year. I think that there's a lot of conversations that we've been having with stakeholders and key leaders to say, this is wonderful, but how can we continue the conversation around support for our smallest businesses and continue to be a resource for them and be an advocate for them. So as we kind of think to the future, and I think that probably Brian has talked about how we kind of bring people, business, and place all together. How can we really think about economic incentives for small businesses in a really impactful and inclusive way? And so really looking forward to the new year to be able to do that.
Great. Well, we really appreciate the work and knowing how the system works, knowing the people, having respectful relationships with people that are involved in the process, but then also the persistence of following these issues over very long periods of time. Persistence really pays off. I think this week demonstrated that. The other one, that state and local tax, you're limited on how much you can deduct at the federal level. By changing the way that you pay your business taxes at the state, it will make it so you can deduct all of it on your federal tax return once that is processed through. That's another one that previously was vetoed, and yet because it was kind of put through as more of a package, I'm very confident it won't get vetoed this time. And so we're really proud of the way that this year has closed. And I know it doesn't make the, it's not the big billion-dollar deals that everybody's talking about around the country and potentially here in Michigan, but it's really more impactful because it's the ones that were here all the time, the ones that have made their whole lives in Michigan. So thanks for joining us today, Alexa.
Thanks, Brian.
So you know what I'm hearing, Brian? When you and Micah were in charge of this, your stuff got vetoed. Now that Alexa's here, she got it done. So that's pretty good stuff.
I tell you what, it was really something to watch this process move. And the reason that we wanted Alexa to join the team is because of the relationships that she has across the entire political spectrum, from the governor's office to the legislature. And you really can't, there are plenty of times when we didn't like the direction that the governor went over the last couple of years, but we have insisted on maintaining a strong, productive working relationship. So when these opportunities come up, that we can really capitalize on.
Yeah, well said. The other thing that is happening, speaking of the governor, is she just actually maybe surprised us a little bit in calling for special elections for some empty seats. just the political math would have been, might have been advantage to the Democrats had she left them open. But I think, may have been in a sort of sense of right and fair, call some special elections.
Yeah, there are 4 seats in the House of Representatives that are open right now. It's an unusually high number. 2 of them because they were elected to the Senate. So there's a whole cascading of things that happened. A couple of senators got elected to county-wide offices in Kent County and Macomb County. Then some state representatives ran for those Senate offices and won. And so that created some open positions in Kent County and Macomb County. And then there were 2 other positions that were open. One because Abdullah Humud in Dearborn became the mayor, and he will be, as of the end of the year, vacating that office, will become mayor. So there'll be an open seat there. And then tragically, Andrea Schroeder in Oakland County died earlier this year. And so 4 positions, there need to be special elections to fill those positions. The governor called those last week. The governor sets state legislative elections, special elections for open seats. And those will, the primary, so there'll be a primary and a general. The primary will be March 1st for all 4. And the general will be May, I think it was May 3rd, but the beginning part of May. And so that is it was a bit of a surprise. I wouldn't have been surprised if, the governor could have waited a couple more quarters before calling those special elections. In the past, though, she has said that she favors filling positions as quick as possible. And of course, I think that's the right answer, regardless of who it politically favors. Every community deserves representation. And the faster you call these special elections to make sure they get it, the better.
Yep. All right. One of the things we've been watching is inflation. We started talking about it months ago. Continue to be concerned about this. We just saw that the wholesale inflation rate has jumped up to 9.6%. And earlier today, the Federal Reserve announced that they're going to begin to do something about it, some policy changes.
Yeah, so we're used to looking at the consumer price index. There's also inflation prices. There's an index for that as well. Came in at 9.6%. It was expected to be high. It was estimated to come in at 9.2, so it come in higher than the estimates. Now this one is not yet at a 40-year high like CPI is, the Consumer Price Index. This one reached that level of 9.6 very briefly in 2010 during that recovery from the Great Recession that had really started to take hold. The Federal Reserve, which we've expressed some frustration with over the last few months, as they've been slow to recognize the persistent and troubling nature of inflation. They have now they at first they kind of denied it, then they accepted it but didn't take action. Finally, we see them starting to take action. So 2 things that came out of their meeting yesterday. First was that they will stop the policy of buying bonds and phase it out through the month of March next year. And this was this policy, what it was meant to do back when it was started, when our economic future is more uncertain, was to just insert some stimulus on a regular basis into the economy. Think of it like you get badly injured and you need a blood transfusion. But once you're healed, if you keep on putting more in, that transfusion caused a problem. That's what we're really, I think, was happening here, was that this Federal Reserve activity, it was very helpful in the beginning, but it outlived its usefulness and actually was contributing to inflation. And then so they're going to stop that. It's going to be phased out between now and March, and then they also signaled that they in the future will be doing some rate increases on the Fed funds rate, and maybe we'll look at up to 3 over their coming meetings, and they could ratchet up 3 times without it. It won't have a big, it's not like you're going to go back to seeing the rates of a long time ago. They're still historically very, very low, but getting them off the artificially low period where it was needed for stimulus, or perceived to be needed for stimulus before, and again, part of that contribution to inflation. So by pulling back on some of these monetary policies, taking some action, it will start the process. And I think it is reasonable to expect that these are real actions that are addressing actual contributing factors to inflation. And really the first thing I've seen so far that gives me some hope, like maybe this will start to get under control.
One of the other things that is highly thought to be contributing to inflation is federal spending. And we've been watching this Build Back Better bill or package of bills that have been sort of moving through the Congress, and just in the last couple of days, it looks like they will not be passing that, at least not in the current session or in this calendar year. It's been interesting, just the games that are played sometimes, and how you mark up or understand what it really costs and what it might do to the economy. The Congressional Budget Office is the neutral third party that values these things. Some interesting things that came out just recently from the CBO about Build Back Better.
You might recall that the Build Back Better proposal originally was $3.5 trillion with a T, trillion dollars. It was then supposedly scaled back to about 1.75 trillion, trying to get enough support to pass it through the process. And so the Congressional Budget Office had to score out the cost of the bill according to what the bill said, even though there were a lot of accounting gimmicks in it. And so what they said was, we're going to raise taxes, and for 10 years, we're going to do all these social services, but we're only going to go do those for a couple of years, and then they're going to expire and all go away. Well, everybody knows that they don't expire and they won't all go away. And but the Congressional Budget Office said, okay, 10 years of this revenue from the tax increases and 2 years of the social service support, it will only add to the deficit $367 billion over that 10-year period. I'm sorry, the debt, add to the debt, not the deficit. So that was the original. Estimate. Then the Congressional Budget Office said, but if you were to continue these social services, which is everybody knows is the intention, that the actual cost over the course of the bill would be 5 trillion. This is the one that they marketed as 1.75 trillion, but it's 5 trillion. And by the way, the debt will increase by 3 trillion. So there's tax increases that would pay for 2 of the 5 trillion, and then add to the debt of 3 trillion. So this was it's actually a little bit of an unusual move to see the Congressional Budget Office, at the request of a member of the legislative body, said, hey, what if though the fairy tale world of a federal program being stopped after 2 years, what if it just continues for the whole time of the bill of 10 years? And as you can see, it's a massive, massive difference. I was a little bit surprised at how big that differential was. So they advertised it as $367 billion in total, and adding to the debt. The actual amount that it adds to the debt is almost 10 times more.
Yeah, I think everybody in Washington, or those of us who observe, knew that trick was being played, and it was partly to get the CBO to give it a lower score. So I think it's a good thing the CBO actually responded to a member of the Senate who asked, would you play it out? Because that's certainly the intent. All right, sort of back at home, the Detroit Regional Chamber of Commerce did a poll. They poll on a regular basis, not just businesses. In fact, in this case, the public. and some interesting reactions, and I think in particular for us, to a vaccine mandate.
We know that most business owners are opposed to the idea of having to enforce vaccine mandates or fire and discipline employees who don't submit to either a mandate or weekly testing. We know that because we talked to our members, we've surveyed our members, and so forth. But the Detroit Regional Chamber, though, pulled a lot of subjects, including this, and asking the general public, the employees and everybody else out in there in the general public, what do you think about this this vaccine and testing mandate? And what they found was 54% opposed and 41% supported. So 54% opposed, 41% supported. That was across the whole population surveyed. But they also asked people for their political affiliation. You might say, well, probably Republicans more opposed and Democrats more supportive. Yes, that's true. But the part that I think really that all the political people are going to take notice of is that independents, people that identify as independents, not affiliated with Republicans or Democrats, opposed it by a rate of 58 to 34%. And so when if you were to look at the, if you were to maybe be surprised when we reported over the last couple of weeks that the governor has said no thank you to a state-based vaccine mandate, and maybe we're surprised by that, looking at this polling, anybody who is standing for election, I think would think, especially on a statewide basis in a purple state like Michigan, a swing state like Michigan, has to really pay close attention to what independents think. And independents do not like, by a margin of almost 2-to-1, do not like the idea of a vaccine and testing mandate being imposed in private sector employment.
And it would appear that our governor has gotten that message, that we continue to watch and listen for signs and signals coming out of, as we watch some other states actually moving backwards to reimposing mask mandates in some cases. It's very interesting to see that, that issue in particular, how independents think, will have an impact on and it appears to be having an impact on our governor.
Yeah, and that really is a, before, certainly through the summer and through the beginning part of the fall, it seemed like the pandemic response was going to be mainly focused on vaccine advocacy, and the federal government doing the mandates at several levels for federal employees, for federal contractors, and then the private sector. And but at the state level, you didn't see a lot of states moving. But then you saw New York start to move, and then a private sector mandate a mask mandate coming back for indoors in California. Now those are of course famously left-leaning states, so it's not surprising that it would start there. But but we also see, if you look across the pond in Europe, you see a lot of these types of restrictions that are making a comeback as well. So things are starting to change. Now, if you look across the landscape, though, in most of the country, you don't see that yet. On the coasts, you're starting to see some of that, but in the heartlands, it's difficult for me to imagine a scenario where the policymakers between the two coasts of our country come to the conclusion that the general public would accept anything that looked like 2020. But there are parts, Western civilization and other parts of the world that are taking actions that look a little more like 2020. By the way, we talked about numbers. It's not Data Thursday, it's always Data Monday. But I think it's worth noting that we were speculating over the last couple briefings that we were cresting on hospitalizations. There is additional evidence that we have, and that finally that hospitalization number is starting to fall. It had crested well over 4,000 patients. And I know that there's there's some kind of frustration or questioning, like, how could hospitals be full? mean, we have 10 million people that live in the state, and the healthcare system is, 4,000 additional people that are sick enough to be in the hospital can really push the healthcare system to the brink. There's not this massive margin of error. And by the way, it's not, media drives me crazy every time they say there's not enough bed space. They got enough bed space. They don't have the people to take care of the people in the beds. That's where the real problem is. So they could easily find more rooms to put people in, but not more staff to take care of people. So that's really what I think is starting to drive it. But now that Michigan looks like it's hit a crest, now Omicron variant and the difference that will make in the future in terms of hospitalization, I think that's still very much an open question. But thankfully, it looks like this what showed some evidence of a crest is really starting to happen.
All right, so kind of staying with this theme about what's happening across the country with mandates, we watch the courts. I think it's fair to say that federal policy has actually been challenged, and federal policy is having a tough time in the federal courts. State policy, on the other hand, is a little bit of a different story, as state governors mostly and administrations have imposed different kinds of mandates, and then they're beginning to wind their way through the state courts. What are we seeing there?
I think it's worth reminding people that some things are not legal at some levels of government, but they are legal at other levels of government. In terms of requiring vaccines and testing and which exceptions you give and all that kind of stuff, I think it's safe to say, looking at both just practice and history of our country, but also of the court actions that have been taken so far, is that states do have more authority than the federal government. At least that's how it looks like it's playing out. Federal government on all its various types of vaccine mandates have taken hit after hit after hit in court, but state policies generally have been winning. And so there was a challenge on the healthcare mandate in New York that the United States Supreme Court, so the last place that you can challenge it, declined to take it up. And it was 3-6. It was not close in terms of the decision. So in that case, it was healthcare workers that were saying that New York didn't provide a religious exemption, and kind of surprisingly, the Supreme Court said, you're supposed to provide a religious exemption, but it doesn't say what accommodation that you have to make and how broad and wide that is, and therefore, with New York making it as narrow as they could, it's legal at the state level. I don't think that it would have been I don't think that tells us anything about the chances that OSHA has. That's a different level of government, different set of statutory authorities that they're relying on. And so I think basically you're going to see states continue to affirm, or courts, continue to affirm. States do have a lot more authority in this area. And if something is to happen, and let me clarify one more thing, just because a state has authority doesn't mean that a governor can do it on their own. So a state having authority might mean that if a law has to get passed, if a law is passed, then the state can do certain things. The ability to do things by emergency order, I think that's where things get very sticky, a lot of interpretation, and where you see court action over the course of the last several months, when governors kind of push the envelope on current taking new actions justified by old statutes, that those are ripe for challenge, and in the end it'll all get sorted out. But most of these things, I think at the end of the day, the end of the road is the United States Supreme Court.
All right. Well, that's what we have for you today. Thanks for joining us as always. We'll be back here Monday at 3 o'clock. Monday, actually, Brian, will be my last briefing. You're going to carry on these briefings into the new year with Sarah and Alexa and others, very capable people on our staff. So looking forward to that, and I'll see you on Monday, and hope everybody remembers to shop small during the season.
All season long. Thank you very much for watching. We'll see you on Monday.